Sawadee-kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group where we study the words of the Buddha. In this program, the way that we do it is I invite students in Zoom to be able to read a chapter of the book. Then afterwards, I share some teachings on that. Then we open up to any and all questions that you guys might have. If you'd like to ask questions and you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can put that into the comment section. I'll be able to see it. Or if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any and all questions that you like. Today, we're in Volume 8, Chapters 21 through 30. This book is titled The Foremost Householder. So these chapters are geared towards household practitioners, but it would also be ordained practitioners that would need to learn these as well, because they're going to need to guide the household practitioners in their practice. And there's also things in here that would actually help an ordained practitioner as well. So I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. If you would like to volunteer to read any chapters in Zoom, you're welcome to raise your hand. I see Marcy's raised her hand, so go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. 4 ways of living together. Householders. There are these 4 ways of living together. What for? A wretch lives together with a wretch. A wretch lives together with a female heavenly being. A heavenly being lives together with a wretch. A heavenly being lives together with a female heavenly being. And how, householders, does a wretch live together with a wretch? Here, the husband is one who destroys life, takes what is not given, engages in sexual misconduct, speaks falsely, and indulges in liquor, wine, and intoxicants, and the basis for heedlessness. He is immoral, of unwholesome character. He resides at home with a mind obsessed by the stains of selfishness. He insults and degrades ascetics and Brahmins. And his wife is also one who destroys life, takes what is not given, engages in sexual misconduct, speaks falsely, and indulges in liquor, wine, and intoxicants, the basis for heedlessness. She is immoral, of unwholesome character. She resides at home with a mind obsessed by the stains of selfishness. She insults and degrades ascetics and Brahmins. It is in such a way that a wretch lives together with a wretch. And how does a wretch live together with a female heavenly being? Here, the husband is one who destroys life, takes what's not as given, engages in sexual misconduct, speaks falsely, and indulges in liquor, wine, and intoxicants, the basis for heedlessness. He is immoral, of unwholesome character, and he resides at home with a mind obsessed by the stains of selfishness. He insults and degrades ascetics and Brahmins. But his wife is one who abstains from the destruction of life, from taking what is not given, from sexual misconduct, from false speech, from liquor, wine, and intoxicants, the basis for heedlessness. She is virtuous, of wholesome character. She resides at home with a mind free from the stains of selfishness. She does not insult or degrade ascetics and Brahmins. It is in such a way a wretch lives together with a female heavenly being. And how does a heavenly being live together with a wretch? Here, the husband is one who abstains from the destruction of life, from taking what is not given, from sexual misconduct, from false speech, and from liquor, wine, intoxicants, the basis of heedlessness. He is virtuous, of wholesome character. He resides at home with a mind free from the stains of selfishness. He does not insult or degrade ascetics or Brahmins. But his wife is one who destroys life, takes what is not given, engages in sexual misconduct, speaks falsely, and indulges in liquor, wine, and intoxicants, the basis for heedlessness. She is immoral, of unwholesome character. She resides at home with the mind obsessed by the stains of selfishness. She insults and degrades ascetics and Brahmins. It is in such a way a heavenly being lives together with a wretch. And how does a heavenly being live together with a female heavenly being? Here, the husband is one who abstains from the destruction of life, from taking what is not given, from sexual misconduct, from false speech, and from liquor, wine, and intoxicants, the basis for heedlessness. He is virtuous, of wholesome character. He resides at home with a mind free from the stains of selfishness. He does not insult or degrade ascetics and Brahmins. And his wife is also one who abstains from the destruction of life, from taking what is not given, from sexual misconduct, from false speech, and from liquor, wine, and intoxicants, the basis for heedlessness. She is virtuous, of wholesome character. She resides at home with a mind free from the stain of selfishness. She does not insult or degrade ascetics and Brahmins. It is in such a way that the heavenly beings live together with a female heavenly being. These are the 4 ways of living together. When both are unwholesome, selfish, and abusive, husband and wife live together as wretch. The husband is unwholesome, selfish, and abusive, but his wife is virtuous, practicing moral conduct, charitable, generous. She's a female heavenly being living with a wretched husband. The husband is virtuous, charitable, generous, but his wife is unwholesome, selfish, and abusive. She is a wretch living with a heavenly being husband. Both husband and wife are enriched with confidence, charitable, and mental discipline, living their lives righteously, addressing each other with pleasant words. Then many benefits accumulate to them, and they reside at ease. Their enemies are saddened when both of them are the same in virtue. Having practiced the teachings here, the same in virtuous behavior and observances, delighted in the heavenly world, they rejoice, enjoying sensual pleasures.
All right. Thank you, Marcy. So here the Buddha is giving us a perspective of different types of people who could live together. And he's using the natural law of Gama to help us see that. And in each one of these situations, except for number 4, there's going to be difficulties and struggles in those relationships and for those people in life. Because you see here where he's talking about how an individual destroys life, which is killing, takes what is not given, which is stealing, engages in sexual misconduct, which he explains that very clearly in the 5 precepts as, having sex with minors, having sex without consent, going outside your relationships, things like that. Then speaking falsely is lying, indulging in liquor, wine, and intoxicants, substances that are causing heedlessness. That's all the 5 precepts. And if someone is not practicing the 5 precepts, they're going to be experiencing a significant amount of unwholesome Gama for themselves. But then anybody who chooses to live with them, either husband, wife, partner, anybody like this, they're going to experience a lot of difficulties and struggles too from having to live with somebody like that. And then the Buddha goes on further and talking about an individual who's immoral, unwholesome character, that their mind is obsessed and has this selfishness, and they essentially have slander and gossip towards ascetics and Brahmins. So if this is the case, those ascetics and Brahmins are the ones who are looking to help other people by sharing teachings that would be helpful. So here, this is an individual who is not really practicing even some of the basic things related to the natural law of Gama and the path to enlightenment. And if 2 people like that are living together, it would be a very turbulent relationship. And not only that, but even in the second category where one person is living in that way, but one person is wholesome, that's going to be a very turbulent relationship too. And this number 3 is essentially the same thing. It's only number 4 where both people are essentially practicing based on the natural law of Gama that now they can actually live harmoniously together. And this is going to promote the best results for them because they're not killing, stealing, having sexual misconduct, lying, or taking substances that cause heedlessness. They're practicing wholesome moral conduct. They're practicing generosity, and they're not insulting or degrading, having slander or gossip towards the people that are actually trying to help others to be able to learn and understand the teachings. And in this case, these 2 individuals can live in harmony together. In doing so, what the Buddha is essentially saying down here is that your enemies would be saddened because they will see that you're living such a great life together. And now those enemies wish you harm and they have ill will towards you. But when these 2 people are living in harmony, it saddens their enemies. The Buddha does go on here at the bottom, and essentially he's describing that, these 2 people living together, if they die and having gotten short of enlightenment based on what he's describing here, that there's the potential for them to be reborn in the heavenly world. Of course, that's not the goal of the teachings of the Buddha, but he's explaining the entire natural law. He's not leaving anything out, that yes, if these 2 individuals do fall short of enlightenment for any reason, then there's the potential that they could be reborn together in the heavenly world and they would be together in that existence. So he's helping you to be able to see that totality of the natural law so that he's not leaving anything out. But that's not the ultimate goal of this path. The ultimate goal is to get to enlightenment and escape the whole cycle of rebirth. So let me know if you guys have any questions on this chapter. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. All right, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So we'll go to chapter 22. Is there anyone who would like to read this? Okay, it looks like Pat. This is all about the natural law of karma.
6 aspects of karma to be understood. Monks, when it was said, karma should be understood, the creation of karma should be understood, the diversity of karma should be understood, the result of karma should be understood, the elimination of the creation of karma should be understood, the way leading to the elimination of karma should be understood. For what reason was this said? 1. It is volition, monks, that I call karma. For having willed, one acts by body, speech, or mind. And what is the creation of karma? Contact is its creation. And what is the diversity of karma? There is karma to be experienced in hell. There is karma to be experienced in the animal realm. There is karma to be experienced in the realm of afflicted spirits. There is karma to be experienced in the human realm. And there is karma to be experienced in the heavenly realm. This is called the diversity of karma. 4. And what is the result of karma? The result of karma, I say, is threefold. To be experienced in this very life or in the next rebirth or on some subsequent occasion. This is called the result of karma. 5. And what, monks, is the elimination of the creation of karma? With the elimination of contact, there is elimination of the creation of karma. 6. This noble eightfold path is the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome karma, namely, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. When, monks, a noble disciple thus understands karma, the creation of karma, the diversity of karma, the result of karma, the elimination of the creation of karma, and the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome karma, he understands his penetrative spiritual life to be the elimination of unwholesome karma. When it was said, karma should be understood, the creation of karma should be understood, the diversity of karma should be understood, the result of karma should be understood, the elimination of the creation of karma should be understood. The way leading to the elimination of unwholesome karma should be understood. It is because of this that this was said. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So this entire path to enlightenment involves cultivating wisdom of the natural law of karma. You're going to need to know that natural law very closely in order to be able to make your way to enlightenment, ultimately extinguishing your unwholesome karma and cultivating only wholesome karma so that you can experience peace and joy throughout the rest of your life. So these are 6 aspects of karma that need to be understood in order to awaken the mind to enlightenment. And these are some of the basics of the natural law of karma. The first one, the Buddha is talking about how there needs to be volition in order to create karma, intentional decisions by body, speech, or mind. So if an individual went out in the world and they were actively killing human beings and intending to murder human beings, there would be a certain amount of unwholesome karma that is being produced there because there's the intention to kill. But if you were walking down the street and a cockroach ran under your foot as you were just walking and you ended up killing it, this has no intention behind it. So there's not actually any karma there. Because one of the things that Buddha is guiding you to do is eliminate your craving, anger, and ignorance. That's the whole path in more detail, the 10 fetters. So if someone's out there murdering human beings, intentionally murdering them, there's a certain amount of craving, anger, and ignorance to be able to do that. So an individual is allowing that craving, anger, and ignorance to motivate unwise decisions. But if you're just walking down the street, there's no craving, anger, and ignorance in that. So as the cockroach comes underneath of your feet, you haven't acted with any craving, anger, and ignorance. So therefore, there's no karma that is generated from that action because there's no intention behind it. There hasn't been any craving, anger, and ignorance. So there's no unwholesome karma that is created there. Then the Buddha is saying that the creation of karma comes from contact, that there needs to be contact. So when 2 beings come in contact with each other, there's going to be karma that's created there. And this is helpful for you when we get to number 5. Then he talks about the diversity of karma, that there's karma to be experienced in each of the 5 realms, in hell, animal, afflicted spirits, human realm, and then the heavenly realm, that you're going to experience karma in each one of these realms, and that the result of karma is experienced either in this life, the next rebirth, or some subsequent occasion. So essentially what he's saying between number 3 and 4 is you can't run and hide from your karma. Any decisions that you make, either wisely or unwisely, you will experience the results of that. So you can't run and hide from any decisions that you're making. Sometimes we think that we can make all these unwise decisions in this life and we're never going to have to account for it, but we will. So that's where the Buddha is helping you to be able to see that, so that now you can understand how to actually go forward and actually work to eliminate your unwholesome karma, that you're not interested in generating new unwholesome karma, but instead you're interested in generating new wholesome karma. Then the Buddha says the elimination of the creation of karma is to eliminate contact. If you eliminate contact, you eliminate the creation of karma. And where this comes in handy is that, say you're in a conversation with someone and you're noticing either them or you, or maybe both of you, are starting to become annoyed or frustrated or agitated, you know that the only thing that's going to come out of y'all's mouth is bitterness and harshness and hostility. And it doesn't make sense to stay in that conversation, because with that contact, you guys are now going to create karma with each other. And if you start arguing and being bitter and harsh and hostile to each other, you're going to create lots of unwholesome karma between the two of you. So the way that you stop this from occurring is you break contact. You walk away, that you go to a room, calm down, or you go outside for a walk. There's no reason to sit there and allow that anger and hostility to bubble up in your mind or the other person's mind and allow that to create unwholesome karma. So if you understand that karma is created through contact, that there needs to be contact in order for there to be the creation of karma, then all you need to do is step away, and that's going to end the creation of karma with that individual. So that's going to help you to be able to make wise decisions in those kinds of situations, because you don't have any place in your life for a negative relationship. You're not interested in hostility or bitterness in any relationship whatsoever. So if at any point you see that your mind or their mind is getting to that point, it's better to walk away. And even if they get more angry when you walk away, that's actually helping you to be able to see you made the right decision. Because if they're getting more angry when you walk away, there's actually some craving, desire, attachment there that is producing that. You're not being disrespectful by walking away. It's actually the most loving and kind thing you can do, is help them to get rid of their craving, desire, attachment. So sometimes when you walk away, someone might shout out to you like, oh, you don't really love me, you're walking away from me, or you make me so angry. You know, they might be blaming you for the things that they're experiencing. And if this is occurring, that's like proof for you that you're making a wise decision, because this person's mind is not controlled in that situation. And you'd like to have discipline to be able to walk away from any kind of situation where there's the potential for unwholesome karma to be created, because you're not interested in creating any unwholesome karma. The way that you extinguish all your unwholesome karma is by learning and practicing the Eightfold Path. That's what that's there for, is that as you get up and running on the Eightfold Path and you practice that for an extended period of time, you will only be making decisions through the Eightfold Path, which are wise decisions, and now you're going to be producing more and more wholesome karma. The way that I describe this typically is like the garden hose analogy, that in the past, we've been putting mud into our garden hose, and now you're hooking it up to the faucet and getting clean water going through the garden hose. That clean water that's going through the garden hose is coming from your decisions based in the Eightfold Path. You know, you're coming to classes, you're consulting with the teacher, you're reading books, you're meditating, you're making decisions in your relationships based on the Eightfold Path. This is putting more and more clean water into the garden hose. And now eventually you're going to flush that garden hose out. Of course, it's going to spit mud for a period of time, but over time, you're going to get more and more clean water coming out of this garden hose. And that's how you know you're cleaning up your unwholesome karma. So it's the Eightfold Path that's going to help you to get to a point where you're only making wise decisions and you're only experiencing wholesome results. And the Buddha describes here where he says that once you understand these 6 aspects of the natural law of karma, that you understand this spiritual life or this path to enlightenment to be the elimination of unwholesome karma. That's the whole goal. That as long as you're having unwholesome karma come back to you, it's going to be very challenging to have a peaceful and joyful mind, right? So if you're out there yelling and hollering and argumentative with the people around you, those people are going to be argumentative with you right back. And now, how can you get to peace and joy when you constantly have people bombarding you with that stuff? Or if you were out there, say, stealing or having sexual misconduct, and you had all these problems coming at you because of all these decisions that are being made. So this path to enlightenment, or this spiritual life, is to eliminate unwholesome karma through practicing and understanding this natural law and making wiser and wiser decisions over a consistent long-term period of time. So let me know what questions you guys have here. Looks like we have some coming in on Zoom. Go ahead, Marcy.
Teacher David, so with this respect of this understanding of what karma is, the creation of karma, just roughly, I was in a situation where there was an opportunity to really practice that part of it, to really understand karma. And now in the moment of the conversation, I found myself very pulled back and holding in, because I'm trying to make sure that I practice right speech. But when this all transaction finally was said and done, the mind felt very drained. Is that normal when you are trying to practice in the moment? It was really a challenge to the mind to keep right speech, to keep equanimity. I mean, inside, there was all these things. I was having all these feelings. I was feeling very taken advantage of, and all of this stuff going on. And I understood it was my own cravings that were causing it. But after it was all said and done, the mind was just I still feel a little bit today that I'm still a little bit tired. The mind seems a little worn out.
Yeah, that's normal, because you're applying so much right effort in that situation to eliminate unwholesome qualities and cultivate wholesome qualities. Eventually, when you get your mind completely transformed, you won't have that. You'll be able to practice these teachings with ease. But right now, as you're trying to bring your practice up to that, it can be pretty exhausting sometimes. And that's where you know to step away from those situations so that you're not creating more unwholesome karma or any unwholesome karma.
And to help alleviate this exhaustion, what I have been trying to do is I've kind of, brought in love and kindness meditation for all of the beings involved. And, when the mind was tired, I'm like, all right, let's just take a nap. Let's just take a nap. Is it okay to almost treat this mind as having to mend it now, to try to let it kind of regroup? Am I taking the right thing, or do I need to stick to my routine, going to the gym, going swimming and all of this stuff? Or is it okay to kind of just pull back a little bit, focus on some love and kindness meditation, and maybe just sleep and let the mind sleep?
Yep, that's fine. That's coming to the middle and making sure the mind can get to the middle before you go out and start doing a whole bunch of other things. Because if you go outside with your mind not in the middle, now you're going to be producing unwholesome karma that you have to deal with.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Teacher David. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Samantha is asking in Zoom, if intent is needed for unwholesome karma, is it the same for wholesome karma? Yes, there needs to be intention behind it. So to create unwholesome karma, there needs to be decisions based in craving, anger, and ignorance. And whenever the mind is making decisions through that, it's going to produce unwholesome karma, and that's the intention behind it. And in order to produce wholesome karma, there needs to be generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. And that's the intentional choices that one is making to produce that wholesome karma. And then she just gives an example. For instance, if one does something kind or nice automatically without intent, is wholesome karma created? Also, sorry, but today I'm unable to help with reading. Oh, no worries, Samantha. Yeah, so in order to do something kind and nice, you would need to be functioning through generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. That's going to be the intent behind it. And that's what's happening. So there would be wholesome karma in that situation. Let's see if we have any questions anywhere else. I don't see anything. So now we'll go on to chapter 23. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Marcy, or looks like Yihang. We'll go to Yihang first. Marcy, we can come to you next.
Thank you, Teacher David. The simile of a lump of salt. Monks, if one were to say thus, a person experiences karma in precisely the same way that he created it. In such a case, there could be no living of the spiritual life, and no opportunity would be seen for completely making an end of discontentedness. But if one were to say thus, when a person creates karma that is to be experienced in a particular way, he experiences its result precisely in that way. In such a case, the living of the spiritual life is possible, and an opportunity is seen for completely making an end of discontentedness. Here, monks, some person has created a small amount of unwholesome karma, yet it leads him to hell, while some other person here has created exactly the same small amount of karma, yet it is to be experienced in this very life, without even a slight being seen, much less plentiful. What kind of person creates a small amount of unwholesome karma that leads him to hell? Here, some person is undeveloped in body, virtuous behavior, mind, and wisdom. He is limited and has a mean character, and he dwells in discontentedness. When such a person creates a small amount of unwholesome karma, it leads him to hell. What kind of person creates exactly the same small amount of unwholesome karma, and yet it is to be experienced in this very life, without even a slight being seen, much less plentiful? Here some person is developed in body, virtuous behavior, mind, and wisdom. He is unlimited and has a lofty character, and he resides without measure. When such a person creates exactly the same small amount of unwholesome karma, it is to be experienced in this very life without even a slight being seen, much less plentiful. Suppose a man who dropped a lump of salt into a small bowl of water. What do you think, monks? Would that lump of salt make the small quantity of water in the bowl salty and undrinkable? Yes, venerable sir. For what reason? Because the water in the bowl is limited. Thus that lump of salt would make it salty and undrinkable. But suppose a man would drop a lump of salt into the river Ganges. What do you think, monks? Would that lump of salt make the river Ganges become salty and undrinkable? No, venerable sir. For what reason? Because the river Ganges contains a large volume of water. Thus that lump of salt would not make it salty and undrinkable. So too, monks, some person here has created a small amount of unwholesome karma, yet it leads him to hell, while some other person here has created exactly the same small amount of karma, yet it is to be experienced in this very life, without even slight being seen, much less abundant. Here, monks, someone is imprisoned for stealing half a kahapana coin currency, a kahapana or 100 kahapanas, while someone else is not imprisoned for stealing the same amount of money. What kind of person is imprisoned for stealing half a kahapana, or 100 kahapanas? Here someone is poor, with little property and wealth. Such a person is imprisoned for stealing half a kahapana, or 100 kahapanas. What kind of person is not imprisoned for stealing half a kahapana, or 100 kahapanas? Here, someone is rich, with much money and wealth. Such a person is not imprisoned for stealing half a kahapana, or 100 kahapanas. So too, monks, some person has created a small amount of unwholesome karma, yet it leads him to hell, while some other person here has created exactly the same small amount of karma, yet it is to be experienced in this very life, without even a slight being seen, much less abundant. Monks, take the case of a sheep merchant or butcher who can execute, imprison, fine, or otherwise penalize someone who has stolen one of his sheep, but can't do so to someone else who has stolen his sheep. What kind of person can the sheep merchant or butcher execute, imprison, fine, or otherwise penalize for stealing a sheep? One who is poor, with little property and wealth, the sheep merchant or butcher can execute, imprison, fine, or otherwise penalize such a person for stealing a sheep. What kind of person can't the sheep merchant or butcher execute, imprison, fine, or otherwise penalize for stealing a sheep? One who is rich, with a lot of money and wealth, a king or royal minister, the sheep merchant or butcher can't execute, imprison, fine, or otherwise penalize such a person for stealing a sheep. He can only plead with him, "Sir, return my sheep or pay me for it." So too, monks, some person has created a small amount of unwholesome karma, yet it leads him to hell, while some other person here has created exactly the same small amount of karma, yet it is to be experienced in this very life, without even a slight being seen, much less abundant. If monks, one were to say thus, a person experiences karma in precisely the same way that he created it. In such a case, there could be no living of the spiritual life and no opportunity would be seen for completely making an end of discontentedness. But if one were to say thus, when the person creates karma that is to be experienced in a particular way, he experiences its result precisely in that way. In such a case, the living of the spiritual life is possible, and an opportunity is seen for completely making an end of discontentedness.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yihang. So here, what the Buddha is saying is that if somebody thinks that somebody could do a particular action and two people doing the same action is going to be experienced exactly the same way by both people, they wouldn't be able to actually get to enlightenment. They couldn't make an end of discontentedness because they're not understanding the natural law of karma. That the natural law of karma, while it's completely fair and unbiased, different people are going to experience the actions and the choices that they make in different ways, depending on how much wholesome karma they've generated at one time in their life or another, or their social status or something of this nature. So the first thing that the Buddha is explaining is that he's using this analogy of the salt, the lump of salt, that if there's the same lump of salt, but it's put into a bowl of water versus a river of water, in one situation, the water is undrinkable, and in the other situation, the water is still drinkable. And he's essentially, the water is representing the wholesome conduct or wholesome decisions that one has made in the past. And you can see this to be true, like say in a court of law, if somebody goes to court and they haven't really done much, harm in their life, maybe they're a pretty upstanding citizen, they could potentially have done, say, something like maybe steal, and they're not going to have the same effect and the same results as someone who has a long track record of doing unwholesome things in the community. They could do the exact same thing, and now they're going to experience the results of that differently. And you can see this in the world, and the Buddha is helping you to be able to see that, how different people can do the same exact action and experience the results in a slightly different way, or maybe a significantly different way. And then the next analogy that he uses is he's talking about a person who has very little wealth versus someone who has significant wealth. And these people can experience their karma in a slightly different way. And remember, he's not explaining to you the way the world should be. He's explaining to you the way the world is. And you can independently verify this, where you can see like celebrities, politicians, very wealthy people. They tend to experience their karma in a different way than someone who has less wealth. And this can help you to be able to understand this natural law of karma, that it's not going to be exactly the same for all individuals. It depends on the wholesomeness or unwholesomeness that you've done in the past. And it also depends on an individual's social status and their current wealth, that can affect how an individual experiences their karma. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular chapter. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, it looks like Marcy has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. If a being experiences their karma in this life, is that an indication that they have extinguished all of their unwholesome karma from their past lives if they're experiencing the karma in this life?
Yeah, if they're experiencing their karma like pretty quickly and it's not carrying over to a future life, this means that they're pretty far on the path. It doesn't necessarily mean they've extinguished all their unwholesome karma from a past life, but this individual is closer to getting to enlightenment because the things that they're doing that are unwise in this life, they're experiencing it pretty quickly and pretty readily. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they've extinguished 100% of their karma from their past lives, because the thing that they're experiencing and how that happens is that from one life to the next, the cravings and residual memories from that past life are coming into the mind of the individual in this life. And now in this life, an individual is making decisions through their craving, their anger, and their ignorance in this life. So even though we say that this is karma from a previous life, it's actually decisions that are being made in this life that one is now experiencing the results of. And it happens to be craving from a previous life that they're now making decisions in this life.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, it looks like Leo has a question.
I think it is. Okay, I hope I didn't forget it. If you did the example with the one person who did a lot of stealing, and the judge will charge him, or he will have more unwholesome karma coming back to him. But because of impermanence, is it right that someone who, for example, was the first time he stole something, but he gets the same maybe punishment of the judge as the other person who stole so many things throughout his life, maybe because the judge don't like this person who just stole one thing? Could this also be because of impermanence? What do you think about that?
Yeah, it could be. What the Buddha is explaining is that's not typically how it's happening. This is how it's typically happening, but that could be the case. But still, that individual is experiencing whatever karma that they're generating. But typically what you experience is what I just described and what the Buddha is describing here.
Okay. So it could be that this person, even if he did he mostly was wholesome throughout his life, but because of the stealing, and the judge didn't like him, or maybe he said something which in this the judge didn't like. Maybe it was not unwholesome, but the judge didn't like it because he, of course, has also craving desire attachment, and he has he has a very strong unwholesome karma, even if he was throughout his life wholesome and so on. Could that happen?
Yeah, but you're adding extra things because the Buddha here is just talking about one particular action of stealing. You're adding all these other things that is piling on the unwholesome karma, like talking to the judge in unkind ways and impolite and things like that. So what the Buddha is teaching here is correct and accurate, but you're just adding a bunch of extra things because the Buddha is showing you a comparison of the same action resulting in different consequences.
Okay. Yeah. For me, it seems a little bit like the karma is because of the craving desire attachments of the people, the judge, for example. Because for me, it seems like that if someone stole a lot of things throughout his life, the people will see that the judge will see this on his paper and think, okay, he did so unwholesome things, he needs to go to jail for 10 years. And the other person who only stole one thing, he sees on the paper, sees, okay, this person just did one mistake. I think 1 year prison, that's fine. It seems like that the karma is because of these people. It's a bit confusing for me.
Yeah, so what you just described is what the Buddha is describing, that the person who's stole a lot of things in the past, now they steal one thing, they might go to jail for 10 years. This other person who hasn't stole anything in the past, they steal one thing and maybe they go to jail for 1 year. That's what the Buddha is explaining here.
Because of the humans who put these people into prison, and because they have cravings and attachment. But let's say they would do these kind of things, and nobody would catch them. So the one person stole a lot of things throughout his life, but nobody saw that and can say that he wasn't. And the other person did steal one thing. How is the karma then? Because there's nobody who saw it, nobody who judged them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not taking into account the craving, desire, attachment in the judge's mind. The Buddha is just showing you very simply, and it's important not to complicate it, that you just see that if somebody's done a lot of unwholesome things in the past versus someone who has done a lot of wholesome things, the same exact action is going to be experienced differently by those two people. And just keep it simple like that, and then you'll be able to see it more clearly.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Okay. So now we'll go into the next chapter. Is there someone who would like to read this? Chapter 24, very short chapter. Okay, Marcy, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. The elimination of unwholesome karma, the Noble Eightfold Path. Monks, the Noble Eightfold Path is the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome karma, namely right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration.
Okay, so this is what you've been learning all along in different ways, that it's the Eightfold Path that's going to allow you to eliminate all your unwholesome karma. And that's accomplished by getting up and running on that. And that's going to take a number of years to get up and running on that. That's why it's important that you commit it to your memory. If you haven't done this already, it's important to study that and commit it to your memory so that you can actually practice it. And it's going to take you multiple years to get up and running where you're making 100% of all your decisions through the Eightfold Path. Then you're going to need to live your life that way for an extended period of time so that the mind can actually experience enlightenment. And that's how you extinguish all your unwholesome karma, is through making decisions based in the Eightfold Path for an extended period of time. And this is what will produce enlightenment. So any questions here on this one? Okay, I don't see anything there. So now we go to chapter 25. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Leo, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. At minimum leads to deeds. Monks, the destruction of life, repeatedly pursued, developed, and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, and to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, the destruction of life at minimum leads to a short lifespan. Taking what is not given, repeatedly pursued, developed, and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, and to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, taking what is not given at minimum leads to loss of wealth. Sexual misconduct, repeatedly pursued, developed, and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, and to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, sexual misconduct, minimum, leads to hostility and competition. False speech, repeatedly pursued, developed, and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, false speech at minimum leads to false accusation. Argumentative speech, repeatedly pursued, developed, and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, argumentative speech at minimum leads to being separated from one's friends. Harsh speech, repeatedly pursued, developed, and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, harsh speech minimum leads to disagreeable sounds. Idle chatter, repeatedly pursued, developed, and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, idle chatter minimum leads to other distrusting one's words. Drinking liquor and wine, repeatedly pursued, developed, and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, to the realm of afflicted spirits. So for one reborn as a human being, drinking liquor and wine, at minimum leads to madness.
Okay, thank you, Leo. So this is kind of a rare situation where the Buddha is essentially helping you to be able to see what certain decisions that you could be making that lead to certain results, and you can see what those results are. And just like everything else in the teachings of the Buddha, you're never interested in believing any of these things. Instead, you look at situations that you've been involved in or the people around you have been involved in, or you look at the news and things that you know about the world to be able to independently verify this. So if you look at this one where the Buddha is talking about destroying life, meaning killing repeatedly, that this leads to a shortened lifespan. So you can look in the world and you can see where this is the case, that if somebody goes off into battle and they're killing, oftentimes it leads to a shorter lifespan. It's not every single time, right? Because as we just studied with the lump of salt, that different things are going to affect different people in different ways. But you can see how in situations where people have been serial murderers or going off into war, that oftentimes they have a very short lifespan because of that. And you can go through each one of these and you can see through experiences that you've had or that other people have had, like sexual misconduct. You can see that if you've had sex with lots of different people, you're practicing unchastity and all the things that the Buddha is describing, that it leads to hostility and competition. You can go through each one of these and independently verify it. If you've ever indulged in substances that cause heedlessness, then you know that yes, it does indeed lead to madness. And the part where the Buddha is describing about being reborn into hell, the animal realm, or afflicted spirits, he's just helping you to be able to see what is going to be the possibility for you to experience. He's not trying to guilt, shame, or fear you into doing anything specific. This is up to you to be able to independently verify these things. But that is one of the results, that if we continue to do these things, then this is what we could experience through each of these individual realms. And then what you would like to do is understand what each one of these unwholesome things are, so that way you can then eliminate that from your actual practice. Because if you're doing any of these things, it's going to lead to the unwholesome results that you see here, whether it's in one of the realms of hell, animal, or afflicted spirits, or in the human realm. These are all things that could occur. So you would like to eliminate all of these things from your practice, because all of these things are typically based in craving, anger, and ignorance. And anytime you're making decisions through those, it's going to produce unwholesome results. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere, or maybe that's Yihang. I don't know if that's a question or maybe reading the next chapter.
Thank you, Teacher David. I can also read next chapter, but I also have a question.
Okay.
About the idle chatter, that I feel like the mind needs to work on the right speech, that not putting out so much speech because of sort of fear of silence in some occasions. So the mind sometimes was trying to, like, when the situation becomes like silent and people are there, maybe, for example, in the company's, I don't know, the coffee kitchen, and then you're there waiting for the water to be boiled and some other colleagues are in line to waiting for coffee or something. And then we're all standing there. And then before the mind has craving to say something like you're getting first coffee here, or just say something random, very, very random. I don't see any things will build from there. And we don't come into any conclusion from those conversations. But recently, I feel like this might be idle chatter, and really wanted to just keep myself, maybe just not saying anything, just standing there waiting. I don't know if this is good, or because I feel like sometimes the mind seems more peaceful, but sometimes it still feels like a little bit like, I don't know, nervous, or a little bit of very active, just wanting to say something.
Yeah, there's no harm in, kind of talking like that when you're waiting in line, just to have a conversation with someone around you. But if you're noticing that there's a craving to do so, then it would be wise for you to just stay there and say nothing, unless somebody else talks to you, right? Mind needs to get comfortable with just being in the presence of other people without anything being said. And when you do that several times and you see the mind doesn't have a craving for it, then if you choose to just talk with people, then that's fine. That you can do those kinds of things. But you would like to just be sure that there is no craving there and that you've tested the mind multiple times to ensure that there is no craving. And then at some point, it might just be something that you choose to do in order to create relationship with the people around you.
Okay. And recently, then I feel like I did both situation when I say something and also not say something. And when I don't say something, sometimes it feels peaceful, but sometimes still feel active. I don't really observe any rule there yet.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like sometimes the mind just feels peaceful, sometimes it's more active. So in this case, would you recommend me to stop speaking for a little bit while more longer and try to get to the point that when I don't speak, I always feel peaceful also?
Yes, it sounds like there's still some restlessness in the mind, which is the ninth fetter. So when you're just there, while sometimes you can feel quite peaceful and calm, other times there's still some bit of restlessness in the mind. And you would like to stamp that out because there's some underlying craving, some kind of residual craving that's producing that. And the way for you to get rid of it is to put the mind in that situation repeatedly so that it can get rid of that craving. And then there can be peace, whether you're talking or whether you're not talking.
Okay. Thank you very much, David.
Yeah, you're
I
welcome.
can also read the next one.
Okay, sure. This is chapter 26.
Okay. Beings bound by action. One is not a Brahmin by birth, nor by birth a non-Brahmin. By action is one a Brahmin. By action is one a non-Brahmin. For men are farmers by their acts, and by their acts are craftsmen too. And men are merchants by their acts, and by their acts are servants too. And men are robbers by their acts, and by their acts are soldiers too. And men are champions by their acts, and by their acts are rulers too. So that is how the truly wise see action as it really is, see dependent origination, skilled in action and its results. Action makes the world go round. Action makes this generation turn. Living beings are bound by action, like the chariot wheel by the linchpin. Thank you.
Okay, so this is helping individuals understand a few different things. During the lifetime of the Buddha, people thought that based on the family that you were born into, that you were destined to have a certain type of life. If you were born into a Brahmin family, they thought that you were holy and you were going to have a certain type of life. If you were born into an affluent family, they thought that you were rich and wealthy and you were going to have a certain type of life, like it was predetermined for you of what you were going to experience. And if you were born into like what we would maybe describe as a lower class family, then you had predetermination of a certain type of life. And the Buddha is basically teaching that that's not true. That's what he's helping people see here, is that it's not that you're holy. When he's talking about Brahmin, he's saying it's not that you're holy by birth, nor by birth not holy, right? He's saying by actions is one holy, and by action is one not holy, because that's what a Brahmin is. They're a Hindu priest essentially, and they were considered to be holy or spiritually developed and things like that. So he's saying that it's your action that's going to determine whether or not you're spiritually developed or not based on where you're born. And then he kind of gives examples of that it's your actions that determine whether you're a farmer, whether you're a craftsman, a merchant, or a servant. It's all your actions. Whether you're a robber, soldier, chaplain, or ruler, it's all your actions. And now he's saying, okay, the truly wise see it as it really is, that it's your actions that determine any particular result, that it's not just predetermination or, some kind of mystical or magical things that determine whether or not you experience any particular results. It's your actions that determine those kinds of things. And then he gives this great little analogy where he talks about the chariot in the linchpin, where like if you have a horse and there's a chariot and then in the middle there's a linchpin, he's saying your actions are like that linchpin. That's what holds it all together. And that's why you're looking to improve your wisdom in your mind about the natural law of karma, but then that's going to inform your actions, and you're going to start making different actions about your bodily actions, your verbal actions, and your mental actions. That's what you're cleaning up on the path to enlightenment. But there needs to be a certain amount of intellectual learning, but then ultimately that's going to inform the actions that you take in a given day, is that you've got that wisdom to understand what's wise and unwise, and now you transform your actions. So if you just learn the teachings of the Buddha intellectually and you never practice them, you wouldn't be able to experience enlightenment, because you're still out there making unwise choices and you're still experiencing unwholesome karma coming back to you. So to get rid of that ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, that 10th fetter, you need to actually be able to practice the teachings day to day perfectly and flawlessly. So an enlightened being is going to be practicing the teachings perfectly. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. This is chapter 26 in volume 8. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here. So we'll move on to the next one, chapter 27. Looks like Pat is offering to read this one. Go ahead, sir.
Reflect upon the consequences of actions. Reflect before doing an action. Rahula, when you intend to do an action with the body, you should reflect upon that same bodily action thus. Would this action that I intend to do with the body lead to my own harm or to the harm of others, or to the harm of both? It is an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results. Or is it an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results? When you reflect, if you know this action that I intend to do with the body would lead to my own harm or to the harm of others or to the harm of both, it is an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results. Then you definitely should not do an action with the body. But when you reflect, if you know this action that I intend to do with the body would not lead to my own harm or to the harm of others or to the harm of both, it is an unwholesome bodily action with wholesome consequences, with wholesome results. Then you may do such an action with the body. While doing an action, also, Rahula, while you are doing an action with the body, you should reflect upon that same bodily action thus. Does this action that I am doing with the body lead to my own harm or to the harm of others or to the harm of both? Is it an unwholesome bodily action with unwholesome consequences, with unwholesome results? When you reflect, if you know this action that I am doing with the body leads to my own harm or to the harm of others or to the harm of both, it is an unwholesome bodily action with unwholesome consequences, with unwholesome results. Then you should suspend such a bodily action. But when you reflect, if you know this action that I am doing with the body does not lead to my own harm or to the harm of others or to the harm of both, it is a wholesome bodily action with wholesome consequences, with wholesome results. Then you may continue in such a bodily action. And after having done an action, also, Rahula, after you have done an action with the body, you should reflect upon that same bodily action thus. Does this action that I have done with the body lead to my own harm or to the harm of others or to the harm of both? Was it an unwholesome bodily action with unwholesome consequences, with unwholesome results? When you reflect, if you know this action that I have done with the body leads to my own harm or to the harm of others or to the harm of both, it was an unwholesome bodily action with unwholesome consequences, with unwholesome results. Then you should confess such bodily action, reveal it, and lay it open to the teacher or to your wise companions in the whole of your life. Having confessed it, revealed it, and laid it open, you should undertake restraint for the future. But when you reflect, if you know this action that I have done with the body does not lead to my own harm or to the harm of others or to the harm of both, it was a wholesome bodily action with wholesome consequences, wholesome results. You can reside peaceful and joyful for any day and night in unwholesome states. A verbal action and a mental action are expounded in the same repetitive phrasing.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So here, this is the Buddha helping you to be able to get closer and closer to practicing harmlessness, where you're not causing harm to others. He's helping you to be able to see how to do that, because you need to cultivate your wisdom and your decision making to ensure that you're not causing harm. Any harm that you put out is just going to come back to you. So he's saying before you do an action, while you're doing an action, and after you've done an action, you can reflect, has this caused harm to me, to others, or to both? And in any situation where that has occurred, you would like to eliminate that from your practice. If you're getting ready to do an action, refrain from doing that action because you know it's going to cause harm. If you're in the middle of doing a certain action, stop doing that, even if you're like mid-sentence. Because remember, this is bodily action, verbal action, and mental action. If you're like in the middle of a sentence and you can see how what you're saying is unwise and is going to cause harm, then cut it off in the middle of the sentence and just change the subject or walk away from the conversation. You're not interested in continuing to cause that harm. Or after you've done an action, it's important to reflect, has it caused my harm, harm to others, or harm to both? And now you know and have cultivated wisdom that it would be unwise to do that in the future. And what the Buddha is saying is that it would be wise to then share that with your teacher or wise companions in the holy life, meaning other members in the community who have developed their mind, because by doing that, that's where you get the opportunity to receive guidance. Using the word confess here, it's important for any Catholics or anybody who's been in that type of tradition to not think of it in the same way. It's not like you're going to be given Holy Marys to go off to the altar and do some kind of punishment. That's not what it is. In confessing what it is that you've done, it helps the ego to come down some, and it allows you to cultivate your wisdom to now not do those kinds of things in the future. Because students could come to their teacher and tell me all the wonderful and amazing things you're doing in the world. Okay, great. I know that you're doing those things because that's what happens when you practice the teachings of the Buddha. But what you really need help with are those challenges and struggles that you're having. Come and talk to your teacher about those things, because then you'll actually be able to get help to be able to improve those. Because once you get to the end of all of this, before an action, during an action, and after an action, if you've actually practiced in such a way that you haven't caused any harm, that's where the Buddha says you can reside peaceful and joyful. If you've ever been in your bed at night, just kind of ruminating over all the things that you've done in your given day and feeling guilty or shameful for the things that you've done, and you had a difficult time sleeping, that's why, because your mind didn't understand the natural law of karma very well, and you were out there doing unwise things and you regretted it later. But here, if you have practiced well all throughout your day, knowing with 100% confidence you haven't caused any harm, then you can be peaceful and joyful. And now at nighttime, you'll be able to easily fall asleep. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. This is really helpful for you to reflect on these things, particularly when you're having like big important meetings or big conversations with people. This is really helpful to be able to do these things, reflecting before, during, and after. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So I'm going to move on to this next chapter, 28. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Marcy, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. Fulfilling the goal of asceticism. Monks, this is the lowest form of livelihood, that is, gathering alms food. In the world, this is a term of abuse. Your alms gathering, you roam about with beings with a begging bowl in your hand, and yet monks, clansmen intent on the wholesome, take up that way of life for a valid reason. It is not because they have been driven to it by kings that they do so, nor because they have been driven to it by thieves, nor owing to a debt, nor from fear, nor to earn a livelihood. But they do so with the thought, I'm immersed in birth, aging, and death, in sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. I am immersed in discontentedness, oppressed by discontentedness. Perhaps an ending of this entire massive discontentedness might be attained. It is in such a way, monks, that this householder has gone forth, yet he is craving, inflamed by desire of sensual pleasures, with a mind full of ill will, with intention corrupt by hate, muddle-minded, lacking clear comprehension, unconcentrated, scattered brain, loose in his sense bases. Just as wood from a funeral bonfire, burning at both ends and smeared with excrements in the middle, cannot be used as timber either in a village or in the forest. In just such a way do I speak about this person. He has missed out of the enjoyments of a householder, yet he does not fulfill the goal of asceticism.
Okay, thank you, Marcy. So what the Buddha is talking about here is someone who's ordained, but they're not actually learning and practicing the teachings. He's saying essentially they're useless. It's like this log with excrement smeared all throughout the middle of it and burning on both ends. You can't even pick it up. You can't do anything with it, that it's basically useless, right? So he's saying the same thing is true for an ordained practitioner, because to ordain, he's saying up here that these people aren't forced into ordaining. Like nobody's forcing you to ordain. You're ordaining based on your own choices. And then the reason why you would choose to ordain is because you realize that, hey, there's all this discontentedness, and I would like to eliminate this discontentedness. You don't have to ordain in order to eliminate your discontentedness, but that would be the only reason why someone would choose to ordain, is to be able to get rid of your discontentedness, train the mind on the path to enlightenment. But then, having gone forth in the holy life and practicing through an ordained lifestyle, this individual is not actually practicing. That's what the Buddha is describing here, that this individual is not actually practicing the teachings and developing their mind. And then he says, essentially using this analogy of the wood, that this person's useless, that they're not actually doing what they should be doing, which is learning and practicing and developing their mind. And you'll encounter people like this. It would be unwise to judge those people, but the Buddha is just basically teaching his ordained practitioners, because I'm sure there were people in his presence during this discourse who meet this exact description. And rather than call those people out, he's just basically giving a discourse, and then those people can figure this out for themselves, that this is the case, that they are basically not doing what it would be wise for them to do. So if you're going to enter into this life of practicing the path to enlightenment, then practice it. Do it in a dedicated way. Be committed to it and really make progress on the path. You don't have to be super serious, but you don't need to be complacent and dull and lethargic either. Be in the middle where you're gradually working towards improvement. And that's the best thing that you could ever do, because nobody's forcing you to practice the teachings. It's your own choices that are going to lead to improvement to the condition of your mind in your life. So let me know what questions you guys have here. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions there, so let's go to chapter 29. Someone would like to read this one? Okay, Yihang, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. Give gifts to the community. My family gives gifts, Venerable Sir, and those gifts are given to monks who are arahants or on the path to arahantship, those who are forest dwellers, alms-food collectors, and wearers of rag robes. Since, householder, you are a household practitioner enjoying sensual pleasures, living at home in a house full of children, using sandalwood from Kasi, wearing garlands, scents, and ointments, and receiving gold and silver, it is difficult for you to know these are arahants, or on the path to arahantship. If householder, a monk who is a forest dweller, is restless, puffed up, conceited, talkative, rambling in his talk, model-minded, lacking clear comprehension, unconcentrated, with a wandering mind, with loose sense bases, then in this respect he is blameworthy. But if a monk who is a forest dweller is not restless, puffed up, and conceited, is not talkative and rambling in his talk, but has mindfulness established, clearly comprehends, is concentrated, with singleness of mind, with restrained sense bases, then in this respect he is praiseworthy. If a monk who resides on the outskirts of a village, if a monk who is an alms-food collector, if a monk who accepts invitations to meals, if a monk who wears red robes, or if a monk who wears robes given by householders is restless, puffed up, conceited, talkative, rambling in his talk, muddle-minded, lacking clear comprehension, unconcentrated, with a wandering mind, with loose sense bases, then in this respect he is blameworthy. But if a monk who resides on the outskirts of a village, if a monk who is an alms-food collector, if a monk who accepts invitation to meals, if a monk who wears red robes, or if a monk who wears robes given by householders is not restless, puffed up, and conceited, is not talkative and rambling in his talk, but has mindfulness established, clearly comprehends, is concentrated with singleness of mind, with restrained sense bases, then in this respect he is praiseworthy. Come now, householder, give gifts to the community. When you give gifts to the community, your mind will be confident. When your mind is confident, with the breakup of the body after death, you will be reborn in a good destination in a heavenly world. Venerable Sir, from today onward, I will give gifts to the community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yihang. So here the Buddha is giving guidance for individuals to be able to determine whether someone is enlightened or not. Because if you're giving gifts to someone who's either enlightened or close to enlightenment, that's very helpful for you, because now you're coming in contact with someone who can share wisdom with you to be able to make your way to enlightenment. And as a household practitioner who hasn't maybe studied the teachings very closely, it can be challenging for that individual to know who would be enlightened and who's not. As you develop on the path, you'll be able to determine those kinds of things very easily, but an individual who's just getting started might not have that background. So the Buddha is teaching here some kind of like shorthand ways to be able to figure out whether somebody is actually enlightened or not. If an individual is restless, puffed up, conceited, talkative, rambling, muddle-minded, lacking clear concentration or comprehension, unconcentrated, having a wandering mind, loose in their sense bases, meaning they have all these cravings to do things, then this individual is not enlightened or close to it. And it would be unwise to make offerings to that individual because they haven't yet really fully developed their mind or even been, made a decent amount of progress on the path. But in situations where those things aren't true, where there's restraint and the mind is not puffed up, there's not that arrogance and all these other things that the Buddha is talking about. Well, in this situation, it could be wise for you to make offerings to that individual. And then having made offerings to that individual, you're going to now be able to come in contact with someone who can help you through you asking them questions. So the Buddha is essentially helping you to be able to see that, how to make offerings to individuals. And then for anybody who's choosing to share these teachings, like an ordained practitioner or a household practitioner who's a teacher, it's important to be able to practice these qualities that the Buddha is describing here, so that way people can gain confidence in you as a teacher that you're actually able to help them to accomplish these same things where their mind can be concentrated and focused. And then the Buddha is saying, okay, giving these gifts to the community, it will help you to have a confident mind. And during the lifetime of the Buddha, there were often times where he was guiding household practitioners to an improved rebirth and potentially, in the human realm or in the heavenly realm. Oftentimes, household practitioners were lacking the time that they needed to be able to make their way to enlightenment, where today that's not the case, that you actually have a better opportunity to get to enlightenment now as a household practitioner than they actually did during the lifetime of the Buddha, because those household practitioners had so many daily tasks just to sustain their life, where you don't have those same kind of challenges because we've made things very convenient for us. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is chapter 29 of volume 8. All right, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So now we'll go to the last chapter for today. This is chapter 30. Looks like Pat would like to read this one. Go ahead, sir.
Do not prevent another from giving. Vasha, one who prevents another from giving a gift creates an obstruction and stumbling block for 3 people. What 3? He creates an obstruction to 1, the donor's acquiring of merit, 2, to the recipient's gaining a gift, and 3, already he has harmed and injured himself. One who prevents another from giving a gift creates an obstruction and stumbling block for these 3 people. Vasha, I say that one acquires merit even if one throws away dishwashing water in a refuse dump or cesspit with the thought, may the living beings here sustain themselves with this. How much more then does one acquire merit when one gives to human beings? However, I say that what is given to one of virtuous behavior is more fruitful than what is given to an unwholesome person. And the most worthy recipient is one who has abandoned 5 factors and possesses 5 factors. What 5 factors has he abandoned? 1, sensual desire, ill will, complacency, restlessness and worry, and doubt. These are the 5 factors that he has abandoned. And what 5 factors does he possess? The virtuous behavior, concentration, wisdom, liberation, and wisdom and vision of liberation of one beyond training. These are the 5 factors that he possesses. It is in such a way, I say, that what is given to one who has abandoned 5 factors and possesses 5 factors is very fruitful. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pat. So here, the Buddha is providing some guidance around giving and practicing generosity to produce merit. He's saying that it would be unwise for you to prevent someone else from making an offering because that individual is going to be able to enhance the quality of their mind by practicing generosity, eliminating craving, desire, attachment. And the person who they're giving the gift to is actually going to gain a certain gift and maybe some supplies that they need in order to sustain their life. So if you were to block somebody from giving a gift, like maybe your life partner or friend is planning to give a gift, and you're like, oh no, don't give that. That's too much. Or you shouldn't do that. You need to step back from that and not put your expectations on somebody else because that's going to injure the donor, it's going to injure the recipient, and it's going to injure your own mind because you're now functioning based on craving, desire, attachment. So this is going to obstruct these individuals and cause difficulties in these situations. So the Buddha is saying here that even if you discard something, throwing some dishwashing water out and saying, maybe these beings actually benefit from this, that's the intention of giving and practicing generosity. Of course, that's like the minimal amount that somebody would do. The Buddha is saying even that is producing some benefit for that individual and practicing generosity. But then if you make offerings to someone who has virtuous behavior, that they're not an unwholesome person, and this individual has abandoned these particular things, this is going to be very beneficial. What he's talking about abandoning here are the 5 hindrances. These are the 5 hindrances to enlightenment: sensual desire, ill will, complacency, restlessness and worry and doubt. So if an individual has abandoned these, then that means they're well on their journey to enlightenment and maybe very close to enlightenment. And that would be very wise to make offerings to that type of individual. And if they possess these qualities of virtuous behavior, you would see that their moral conduct is stellar. You would see that they have concentration and focus during their day-to-day life. Their mind doesn't, lose their train of thought repeatedly. They have wisdom about the path to enlightenment. They have liberation, meaning they don't experience any discontentedness, because if you spend some time around a teacher, you can see that they don't have any discontentedness. And then they have wisdom and vision of liberation, meaning that they understand the path to enlightenment very clearly. And this individual is beyond training. He's saying, okay, if you make offerings to this kind of person, it's very fruitful. Because now, once again, you are coming in contact with someone who can help you accomplish these same things. There's nothing mystical or magical if you just make an offering to this person and you turned away and walked away. Okay, you're practicing some generosity that's enhancing the quality of your mind, but where you really benefit from this offering is you can now develop a relationship with this person and you can get regular training from this person so that you can accomplish these same things where you can get to liberation and actually train the mind to get to enlightenment. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular chapter. This is chapter 30. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here, so I'd like to just thank all of you guys for joining in class. Thank you for reading. Thank you for any questions that you had today to be able to help you and others to be able to learn and grow and develop on the path to enlightenment. Next week, we're going to be in the final chapters of this particular book, which is chapters 31 through 41. So you can study those because that's going to be our last class for this particular book. And then we're going to be moving into volume 9, which is titled The Six Sense Spaces. Tomorrow in our group learning program, I'm going to be sharing chapter 18 of volume 1. This is titled God's Creative Action. You have free will. I'm going to teach all about this being of God, of how to get to enlightenment with a relationship with this being or without a relationship with this being. Because there's certain things that you might have been taught or that you're believing that are hindering you from either having a relationship with this being or not having a relationship with this being. So you can get to enlightenment either way, because it's not this being that's going to determine whether you get to enlightenment or not. So depending on how you would like to progress, you're going to need certain guidance of either how to have a relationship with this being or not, and still make your way to enlightenment. And then, of course, on Wednesday, I'm going to be doing meditation with students and opening up to any and all questions that you have. Today and tomorrow, I'm going to be teaching here in California and live streaming and having Zoom up for the classes and courses that I'm teaching here. I'm going to be teaching today the 3 poisons. I'm going to be teaching the 5 precepts and walking meditation. And then tomorrow, I'm going to be teaching what is Gama and how does it affect me, what is merit, and then continue support and how to integrate the teachings into your day-to-day life. And that's going to be happening 9:30 to 3:30 Pacific time. So you guys are more than welcome to tune into that or watch the recordings. So perhaps I'll see you guys in a future class. Be well and take care. We'll see you next time. Sawadee ka.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.